Uh, Thank you, Balthazar Garzon. Balthazar has played a critical role in leading our legal team, and thank you, Sarah and Kristen, for being there in Geneva. I'm Michael Ratner with the Center for Constitutional Rights in New York. We represent WikiLeaks and Julian Assange in the United States. We also represent Sarah Harrison, Joseph Farrell, and Kristen Hermafison, 3 journalists and editors with WikiLeaks, who were the recipients of the notification from Google about the fact that their emails had been searched and seized. I want to bring you up to date a bit on what's happened in the United States with regard to that. On December 23rd, just over 6 weeks ago, these 3 WikiLeaks journalists were notified by Google that pursuant to search and seizure warrants, Google, had provided the United States law enforcement officials with all of the email content, drafts of email, deleted emails, subscriber data, metadata, contacts, addresses, photographs, essentially everything associated with the accounts of these 3 journalists. Everything, personal, and even to the extent there was email on there, attorney-client communications. The warrants acted like a huge vacuum cleaner. It's shocking that the United States would do that to a journalist organization and to journalists working in that organization. In addition, there were a number of shocking revelations in these warrants, in addition to the, quote, "give us everything you have, Google." First of all, although issued on March 22, 2012, Google waited over 2.5 years. That's 2.5 years to notify its subscribers of these warrants. The subscribers could take no action to stop them. It's to be reflected and looked at Twitter, what Twitter did in a similar situation. They went to court, they litigated it, and were able to notify the subscribers that the US wanted the accounts of. We don't know if Google tried to litigate it or not, but that's one of our requests to Google, 2.5 years. A second striking thing in the warrants is that they were issued to working journalists. All of the material in the United States, all of the press reports, etc., fail really to recognize what has happened to Julian Assange, WikiLeaks, and other journalists working with them. There's been an incredible long-term, and as Balthazar said, 4-year attack against these journalists. A third important aspect of these search and seizure warrants is that they were done on the basis that the United States asserted that the emails and other material from these journalists contained evidence of violations of the Espionage Act, conspiracy to commit espionage, violation of the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, and other federal laws. In other words, somehow the US was putting together a conspiracy charge for espionage and perhaps more against WikiLeaks and the journalists associated with it. In addition, the journalists and WikiLeaks and myself and none of the lawyers have any idea of what was taken, what was the content of what was taken. In the end, every working journalist should be appalled by these warrants. Unfortunately, this is another demonstration of what we have been saying for a number of years. Julian Assange and WikiLeaks are targets of a massive US criminal investigation of their journalistic activities, going back, as Balthazar said, at least 4 years. It's unlike WikiLeaks, of course, to sit back and just simply say, go on. Yes, they're continuing to do their work, but they're also fighting back. In response to these revelations, WikiLeaks sent 3 lawyers letters today. The first is to Eric Schmidt, the chairman of Google. In those letters, we make a number of requests of Google and Eric Schmidt. First, we want to know why were our clients, Sarah Harrison, Joseph Farrell, and Kristen Hermafson, not notified until 2.5 years later of the warrants? Google claims there was a gag order, an order prohibiting them from telling our clients of these incredible broad warrants for their material. But the question is, did Google litigate that gag order so it could tell its subscribers, or did it simply let the government suck up all of its subscriber information? We need to know that. And what's interesting about that is that a year before those warrants were issued, or almost a year before, Julian Assange had a conversation with Eric Schmidt, the head of Google. And in that conversation, Julian asked Schmidt to notify WikiLeaks if a warrant like this was received, and pointed to Twitter as an example of what should be done. As far as we know, that was not done. And our clients were not notified, and for all we know, no action was taken by Google to stop these warrants. We also have asked Google for a list of all the materials disclosed to the federal government. And finally, we asked, did Google get other search warrants for other Google subscribers that were affiliated with WikiLeaks? We want those answers from Eric Schmidt, and we want them soon. The other two letters are to prosecution authorities in the United States. One is to the Attorney General of the United States, Eric Holder, and the other is to the Chief Prosecutor of the Eastern District of Virginia, the federal court that has been involved in the investigation, and the prosecutor that has been involved in the investigation of WikiLeaks. These letters ask a most important question, and our clients are entitled to answers. First, is there an ongoing criminal investigation of our clients? What is the status of that investigation? And are our clients witnesses to that investigation, subjects of that investigation, or targets of those investigations? They have a right to know. 4 years is long enough for a sword of Damocles to be held over their head. And 4 years is long enough for Julian Assange to have been under allegations. And 2 years is long enough for him to have been confined in that embassy. The additional thing we ask is for an inventory of all materials that the federal government took from Google. They ask for everything on those Google subscriber lists. What about materials that were protected by the attorney-client privilege? What did they do about those? And interestingly, a few weeks ago, Attorney General Holder issued new guidelines for going against journalists, for in which cases warrants ought to be issued. And they now require the authority of the Attorney General himself. These warrants, as far as we know, did not have that authority. We are asking the federal government two things: to ensure that any future attempts to go after WikiLeaks have that authority, and secondly, that these warrants essentially be set aside because they did not comply with those stricter requirements. Our hopes are, of course, that Google and the US respond. I want to close on this. Since 2010, it is clear the United States government has WikiLeaks in its sights. There was a grand jury at the Manning trial. They tried to link in a conspiracy WikiLeaks, Julian Assange, and Chelsea Manning. At that trial, it was disclosed that 7 managers of WikiLeaks were under FBI investigation. That was a couple of years ago. But just recently, on May 19th, the federal government acknowledged that there was a subject criminal investigation of WikiLeaks by the Department of Justice, Criminal Division, and National Security Division. And that investigation, Department of Justice, FBI, remains open. And now, fourth warning. Let us remember, these are criminal investigations of published journalists. That is why Julian Assange faces persecution for his work. Okay. Let us remember, these criminal investigations of publishers and journalists is why Julian Assange was given asylum by Ecuador, because he faces persecution for his work as editor, publisher, and journalist. It is long past the time when these investigations should come to an end, as over 50 press and human rights organizations, including Article 9 Human Rights Watch, have told the Attorney General. It is long past the time that asylum grant Assange should be honored by all countries concerned, and Julian should be given his safe passage to Ecuador. Thank you.